Rebecca, thanks so much for coming on the show today. Could you take a second to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the work that you do?
Yeah, thanks so much, John. It is awesome to be here chatting with you. So I'll tell you a little bit about what I do and then also kind of what my mission is, right? And what my vision is. So I lead diversity, equity, and inclusion and culture and sustainability for my organization, for Magnit. And we specialize in the contingent workforce. So that is the contractors, the non-employees, right? The consultants, the temp workers. And so I take that view into a lot of what I do. But overall, I've been doing diversity, equity, and inclusion work, thinking about culture, thinking about people and how we get them to thrive. And then in association, how businesses thrive because their people are thriving. And so when I'm doing that, I'm thinking about making change, creating aha moments, and really helping people think deeper, stopping and thinking and not just reacting. And so that's kind of my mission when I think about posts I do on LinkedIn, on podcasts like this, or in my ambitions to write a book that I'm doing right now, and all of that. These are the aspects that I'm thinking about.
That's wonderful. I think it's really refreshing to hear that you have such a focus on contingent workforce. In my experience, I have a diversity, equity, and inclusion background as well, but it was often the case that the contingent workers were not included in any of that. What are some of the challenges in this work with that lens that people might not expect?
Yeah, it's really fascinating because I have been doing DEI work for 12 years now. So before it was super popular, it's gone through ups and downs over the last few years,
And before it
but
was super unpopular in some circles.
ex
Yeah.
exactly. So in that 12 years, doing a lot of work with thinking about data, really thinking about creating comprehensive diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies that are built into business, built into processes. And I worked with, Fortune 500 companies, smaller startups, educational institutions, so across the board. And I will say, just like you just said, pretty exclusively, they were focused on full-time employees. And for some organizations, that makes sense because 99.9% of their organization is full-time employees. But if you think about tech companies, newer, larger organizations, many of them could be 50 plus percent. It's been actually going down a little bit over the last few years, upping now because of economic uncertainties, but really some organizations could be as much as 60%. And so if you think about who contributes to the success of an organization, it is not just full-time employees, right? Contingent workers, those contractors, those consultants are contributing very heavily to the success of an organization, however you want to define that. Doesn't matter how you're defining that, they are contributing to the success. So it was really exciting to be able to delve in about 5 years ago into the contingent workforce and create service offerings, help support clients on how we do that. But it is challenging. There's a lot of legal aspects and just precedents that have been set to say, oh, we shouldn't, right? We can't do that, right? So really thinking about how do we help partner with organizations to still bring inclusion, still bring equity and help those people thrive, but it doesn't look the same. And really that is the point of all DEI to begin with, right? If you're thinking about diversity and differences and equity, it's not a one size fits all. So this concept of what do we give contingent workers should naturally fall into that of what do these individuals need, because it's not going to be the same things, but the same intent can be there of what do they need to succeed. They need education, they need clear access to what's different roles and how they're able to contribute to their fullest. So they still need some of the same things, but it might look different, right? We're translating it to what they specifically need.
Now, when you try to get to those needs, are you often working directly with the workforce itself or through like an intermediary, like a staffing
Yeah.
agency? Okay. All right.
There's different ways. Our organization is not a staffing firm itself, so we do not staff those people, but people do come in through us. We do, if they're depending on how they're done, that they're called like direct sourcing. So if, a company says, "Oh, I already know John and he's amazing. We don't need a staffing agency to help us find and recruit somebody. Can you put John on the payroll?" Then we will put you on our payroll to be able to contribute to that organization. So in
Okay.
some ways we do. So we'll work directly in some ways and through the programs themselves. And then in other ways, we're partnering with amazing suppliers that are having those personal relationships. And what we do, which is really exciting, it was one of the first in the industry several years ago, is start collecting data. Because data was one of those things that people said, hands off, I don't even want to know, ignorance is bliss. But of course, with some pushes, about 5 years ago in 2020, there was this push to say, no, well, we do need to know. And so I came in with this viewpoint of the full-time staff and what do you do? And you can't do a strategy without data, in my mind. That doesn't exist. A real strategy,
Yeah.
you can say you have a strategy, but if you don't have data as the foundation, is it a real strategy? So really taking a look at collecting that data in the best practice way. So voluntarily, right? We're not voluntarily and self-identified from those individuals themselves. So rather than the staffing agency telling us a word of
Mhm.
mouth, that's not very inclusive. It also has privacy and data integrity
Sure.
issues that make me
Yeah.
very nervous. So we started that program through our technology to be able to collect it in a safe, easy way, very inclusive way with inclusive questions through our technology. And then we can analyze the data. We can say not just what is representation, percentages of people, but what's the life cycle. So in a
Mhm.
full time, I would look at attrition rates, I would look at promotion rates, I would look at these dynamics, right? Hiring rates, so those levers that impact representation, but throughout a life cycle of an employee. But for contingent workers, we had to translate it. We had to say, well, we still want to kind of, what's attrition? What does that mean?
Yeah.
Because naturally they leave after 6 months or a year.
Well, their contract.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
right, it's who leaves their contracts early, right? And are we seeing a certain women, we'll just say, because that's an easy one, right? Leaving their contracts at a significantly higher rate than we would expect. Then we know something's happening there. Let's go talk to those people. Let's go talk to those managers. Is that in one segment of the organization? And that's what we would do on the full-time side. We would say, what is the data telling us of where to look? And then we can look deeper instead of just saying, let's hire women, right? Instead, we're saying, okay, we're actually doing a good job hiring. That's not the issue, but
Let's
they're
keep
leaving when
women.
they get in.
Yeah.
And what's going on there? What's the issue? So we look at who's leaving contracts early, who's getting hired into full-time roles
From
from the
contracts. Yeah.
contingent, and of course hiring rates as well, right? What are we seeing in that funnel and what's happening to them throughout the process? So it's been really exciting to be able to work with organizations on that. And I'm sure you're going to get to it, and I can let you ask the question if you want, but what's happening with that now, right? I would assume that's your next question, right? Because that's been the work for the last few years, but our company's still doing that, I would assume is your next question.
You're a mind reader. What has changed recently that might be challenging this work?
Yeah, so I'll say not almost none of our clients have backed out of what they're doing with us,
Okay.
which I take as a huge win. If you look at the headlines, you would think, whew, every single one of those companies has said no, thank you, right? But
Right.
the 50 plus companies that I'm working with closely on this are still doing it. Is it as vocal? Is it as prevalent in the meetings of saying this is something we have to focus on? It's not. But they haven't backed out of what they're doing. So we're still continuing making progress. But it's not on the top of the priority list anymore. So I think it is important to be cognizant of that fact that there is an impact to this, but it's just not as dramatic as the headlines make it sound.
Right. I find that's the case with a lot of news lately.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Okay. So, earlier in this conversation, when you were introducing yourself, you talked about thriving at work. So I have a couple questions around that, but like, what does that actually mean to you in the work that you do?
Yeah, it's personal, right? And it's individual.
Okay.
And I mentioned that as well. To me, the D&I work is about giving people or enabling, right? So it's not just about giving because that's not the way this works, right? It's not one-sided. So enabling people to get what they need out of work. And that can be different things for different people. Different personality types, different demographic groups, right? Different backgrounds. Those are all different things that people need, but enabling people to find that. So if you need connection, does your workplace offer opportunities for connection, even if you're in a remote space? Do you have an opportunity to have new and interesting assignments if that's something that you're looking for? If you need more stability and you're not looking for those new and exciting assignments, right? That's not who you are, or that's not what you need. You need that stability and you want to know exactly what you're doing every time. Are you able to create that within your workplace, right? Are you able to find what you need? So to me, that is about really clear communication, psychological safety, listening. I just did a post about listening yesterday or today because it's something that I think about personally. I do a podcast like this and I'm talking a lot, but when I get in a meeting with my team or with my colleagues, I want to try to listen more because then I learn, right? Then I have better things to say. So really creating that environment where individuals can thrive in what they need specifically.
Okay, okay. And that is a great compliment to the education, the access, and the ability to contribute to the work,
Yeah.
to be able to have that connection, new novel things if you want it, stability if you want that, and communication and listening. And I have to say, it's great to hear that because I too think that leadership really starts with listening before we start to direct. Um, okay, let's say you get everything right, right? And been able to create the most opportunities, for thriving, like the best environment rather for individuals in teams to thrive. Where's the responsibility, or how do you share that responsibility from, okay, as a company or as a leader, you put all of this, but how, like, what's the personal accountability to then actually thrive at work, or to raise your hand, or to express what you need if it's not already being offered?
Yeah, well, that's why I like to use the word enable because a company can't do all of it. I'd say most companies don't do this perfectly well, and they're not even necessarily thinking about it. So the onus
Until it
is on the
blows up.
company.
Sorry, yeah, like
Yes,
then, yeah, sorry. To,
yeah, exactly. So, they have to enable it. They have to create the infrastructure that makes that possible. So if they just say, this individual, the accountability is on them. They need to be reaching out if they need something. I would have done something if they told me they needed it. But is it a safe place? Can they really speak up? Were they questioned? Were they asked, right? Did somebody say, "Hey, do you need anything? Is this working for you? What do you love to do? What do you hate to do?" I might not be able to take away everything you hate to do, but maybe we can find something that fits better with what you love to do. So asking those questions and having it be a safe place that enables that is so key. So the onerous is really on creating a culture, creating an environment where everyone can speak up when they can say those pieces of what they need to be successful, because you have to have that. You have to have the infrastructure in place. And then it kind of flows throughout an organization. It is really easy to say, oh, a culture is really great from the outside at this company because I see it on their website, I see posts on LinkedIn, this looks great. But really, what is a culture of a company? It's how you treat each other, right? It's the individual behaviors and interactions, right? You and I chatting. How is that conversation? Did we have water cooler at the beginning and get to have a little like, oh, how are you doing? Oh, funny story. And you know each other in that way, or do you get right to work? There's time and place for both of those. But is it only ever one, right? Is it only ever getting to work and you don't feel like a whole person? You're like, oh, it's just all of this, right? So accountability to set the foundation is at the company level. And then there's accountability throughout the levels of an organization to really make it feel like that is something we can do. And it's actually something I'm working on right now at our organization is setting some of those behaviors and expectations of how we work together because that creates culture. And it does sit, right? It sits with kind of a company, a culture leader to say, here are the tools. But if the executives don't do it, if the SVPs don't do it, if the VPs don't do it, yeah, maybe you interact and you're like, this was a good idea at the individual contributor level, but is that a culture then? Probably not, right? So the onerous to me goes throughout. There is this individual piece, but the foundation and then throughout the levels of an organization.
I think it's great. And you unintentionally, and I swear I didn't feed this to you, but that's really why I named this podcast Interaction, was because you can have everything in place, but it can be that one interaction that really makes you, you know, dedicated to a team, or like, no, this isn't the place for me. And no matter how good the environment is, that one interaction can change everything. And I think it's really important that we focus on that and be able to create the big picture, but then focus in on the highest need to where things may be going off the mark. Now, I
Mhm.
love the kind of implementation guardrails that you said, right? You know, you've got the broad statements, the C-suites, and you start to come down. In my experience, like when you get below that high level leadership who are relationship savvy, well versed in their field, it's like they can make you feel genuinely like the most important person when they're talking to you. It's like I've seen it, I'm jealous of it, uh, I felt it. Then you come down where like pressure's a little higher. Like you have to commit. You've got turnover on your team, or you've got two teams that have merged into one and only have one leader now, and that's you. And there's no softening on the output, right? You still have to deliver. What would you say to those? That's where I see it fall apart, right? It's like I
Yeah.
don't have this skill set yet. I don't have that thriving mindset for my team, but I feel that I need to, and no one's taken anything off of my plate. What would you say to the middle level manager who wants to do right by their people, has these expectations or maybe these new things that aren't things that they're already good at, and have these external pressures to like continue to produce in a really uncertain time?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of probably all not very positive terms for that level of an organization, right? I think of the mush in the middle, I've heard, the
Oh,
frozen middle, right?
yeah,
There's lots of terms for that group, all for the reasons you described.
yeah,
So, really thinking
place.
about that piece of it, I will say I've heard that a lot, and there's 100% accuracy in they are asked to do so much, right? They are asked to do all of these pieces. But the piece that I like to push back on is that they don't have that or they're not doing it because
Okay.
I have found throughout 20 plus years now of doing change work and working with people and whether it was in D&I or in mergers and acquisitions and change management, any of the aspects of my career that have has all been focused on people, is that so many middle managers are excellent at it,
Gosh.
that they have the personal connections and that their people love to work for them, right? They say, hey, I think John has my back. He helps me prioritize. I feel seen. He knows what I actually do and knows that I work my butt off. It's that but I don't trust the rest of the company. I don't think
Hmm.
anybody else has my back. I don't know if they even know what I do, but I know that John has my back. So I think sometimes these middle managers get a bad rap in
The
that
better.
way
Yeah.
of the people aspect. But I will say that how much they're asked to do and how much they are asked to manage might be some of these dynamics that we're seeing right now. I'm going to be interested to see in the next, I don't know whether it's 5 years or 10 years, decade or less. Some organizations are looking at trying to get rid of middle management and have it be leaders and then straight to, VPs, directors, straight to
Healthy level of AI in the middle, probably.
yeah, but I see at some point they're still in the middle. No matter if you take out a level, there's still a middle. So I don't know what that's going to accomplish, but I find it interesting. But the other dynamic we're seeing is that the younger generations aren't wanting that work because it's not because they don't want to support people, they don't want to lead people. They don't want to be asked to do a million things and held accountable for it. So we're at some interesting crossroads here of newer generations saying, that doesn't look like any fun. I don't want to be in that role. So I would say, yes, legitimacy to saying they're asked to do so many things. They have way too much on their plates. And so it's hard to tell them to do this other aspect, but I think they're already doing it. That piece, most managers that I talked to when I was a manager, they know the importance of that. They've been in that role. They want somebody to support them. They want those great interactions, and they have the personal connections because those are their teams, right? They
Big time.
know their kids' names, they know the dogs' names, they know their hobbies on the weekend. And so, we've all heard that quote of you leave jobs or you stay, right, for managers, not for the job itself, right? And I think that that's because those middle managers are actually, they have a lot on their shoulders and they are doing it.
They are doing it. So how do you teach or help folks improve that, or even put words around what it is that's in their special sauce as a manager that makes teams want to produce and wants to stick with them?
Yeah. It's a lot about finding how to create those personal relationships, and listening is a key piece of that, right?
Right.
Because for one person, it might look like, event session and how was your weekend, and, really getting into personal life, and that you can tell that they're thriving in that. And or you're asking them when you first start working with them, hey, do you like to chit chat about weekends? I do, but I also have employees that don't really like to. So it's adapting to what your people need rather than just your style and what you want. And not everyone does that, and it's a very hard thing to do. I think about it a lot and I strive to do it. And then sometimes after an interaction, I say, wait, did I adapt or was I pushing on my own style on this person? And as a leader, as a human being, I want to not always. Sometimes I need to do what I need to do with, my spouse or a good friend, and that's okay. That's the right time to do that. But as a leader and as somebody who wants to make change in the world, am I able to have emotional intelligence to pause and think about the the impact that I'm having, right? What can somebody else, what's their reaction? What do they like? Am I being open to those? So, I
Mhm.
have employees that I know all about their life. I have employees where I know just a few things and I know that their dog's name and I know, a few little pieces, and we talk about those and we have those interactions, but I don't know about significant others, and that's okay. And then I have employees that we don't get on camera because I know that they are neurodiverse, and the eye contact drives them crazy, right? That is so hard
Right.
for them. And we kind of compromise a few times, especially when we first got to know each other. We were on camera, and I said, okay, let's do every other time on camera because I'm such a visual person that if I don't see your face, I
Right.
feel like I don't know you. Even if I talk to you 20 times, if I can't have a face in my head, I don't feel like I know you. But we did every other time, and now we don't do it at all, right? We just are off camera. So it's a trying your
Absolutely.
best to adapt, and you're not going to get it right. So you have to know you're not going to get it right every time. Be okay saying, oh, sorry, next time we'll do something different. So it's being able to adapt and think about that and giving people the time to talk through that. So you said, how do you teach them? It's talking through that, thinking about different methods and having the space to be able to say, oh, what would I do here? What could I do there? And sharing that emotional intelligence piece.
Mm. So emotional intelligence has come up in words, but also is a through line to the way that you talk about, the skills that managers should have. And so has like psychological safety. And that term gets used a lot. And in the mix of that, well, creating that psychological space where you can challenge the status quo, you can make a mistake, you have freedom to like learn without being labeled as somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about, or whatever. And there's a lot of other layers to it. Um, in my coaching practice and in the culture work that I bring to companies, I kind of get up against a point where some people really haven't done emotional work unless they've had to for some reason, personal reason, go to therapy, overcome some type of obstacle, or throughout their life. But there are a lot of folks who kind of coasted through, smart people, skilled people, great leaders. But when the landscape changes, they don't necessarily have the language to speak confidently around emotions and may assess that
Mhm.
they don't have those skills or those skills don't have a place. Any tips on kind of, I don't know if it's pulling back the curtain or opening the doors, whatever the metaphor is, to bring folks who don't really like gravitate towards the emotional intelligence language. Like any
Yeah,
tips on bringing people in who might be doing it good without even knowing it. But
right.
do you have any
Well, I think some of those words, and I talk about this when I think about DEI a lot, because sometimes the words themselves can make people feel a little attacked, right? And like, oh, emotional intelligence, I don't know what that is. And like you said, maybe they're amazing at it, but that word emotional intelligence feels unapproachable, right? It
I hate
feels,
it because if you're
right?
not
It
emotionally
feels
intelligent, then you must be stupid, emotionally
yeah,
stupid. Like, I
or
don't
you're a
like this.
jerk, right?
Yeah,
You don't know, you don't care about how people feel if you don't have emotional
right.
intelligence, right? So I think one of the things is to make things more approachable, that
Yeah.
this is about adapting. It's about thinking about
Mm.
what people need to be successful. And if you use that instead of a fluffy term like
Yeah.
emotional intelligence, it's much more approachable.
Yeah.
But so that's one piece. It's like with the words, use the words that are right for your organization and right for the people. So if you're trying to do culture work, and you kind of assess the organization at first, it's like, I don't think emotional intelligence is the right word to use with this group of people. So
Let's
let's
not
use
start
something
here.
else. But
Yeah,
maybe,
yeah.
exactly. But maybe in another organization, that's the word to use, and they eat it up, and they're like, "Oh yes, I learned. Tell me more. Tell me more about emotional intelligence." So I
Rebecca,
think,
just
yeah,
sorry to interrupt, but I was reading a
no,
book on hostage negotiation. It was like never take the win-win or never go for the win-win. I'm sorry, I'm butchering the title. But this guy created a course and he called it Tactical Emotional Intelligence. And the interview asked him why tactical, and he said, "Oh, it's really just so men will do it because if you just say emotional intelligence, they won't go for it." So anyway,
exactly, exactly. And that's cute. Like, who cares what the words that are used are,
yeah.
right? If we get to the end goal, what does it matter what the word that's used is? So I completely agree. So if it's not emotional intelligence, say something else. It's like, what do people need and meet them there? But I think there's a lot of techniques that I've used, and it does have to start. You have to have start from the CEO has to say, this is important. I want everyone to do it. Are you doing it? If you're not doing it, it's not just one time saying it. It is a where's the tracker, right? Who's doing this? And having, reverse mentors, perhaps, right? It's
Mm.
where a C-suite person is talking to a more junior person, perhaps, right? And they share knowledge, but their task is to listen and ask questions. And they start to hear about these pieces, to be tasked with reading articles, right? I think I read and am just insatiable when it comes to what is new, what are people thinking, what's discovered, and still somebody will tell me. A friend the other day was like, "Oh, I don't think we're supposed to say that anymore." And I was like, "Oh, really? Well, let me go look up an article, and I'm going to learn something new." And I
Thanks
think
for letting me
that's
know.
where
Yeah.
it it is scary though, right? When you think about emotional intelligence or you think about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, it can feel very scary. And I understand that. And I have empathy because I have it as well on times. But after
Yeah.
doing this work with people and the complexities of humans, I have come to the conclusion that one, there is no right answer, right? And I guess in some cases there's wrong answers, right? There is, you should do some due
Right.
diligence and there could be a wrong answer, right? That is completely disrespectful or wrong. But there isn't necessarily one right answer. And so we have to be in a mode of learning, right? Constant learning, openness to say, I didn't realize that. I'm sorry if that hurt you, and I will try to do better,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
really being open to that. And when it comes to emotional intelligence or any of these other very charged topics right now, it is trying to
Yeah.
be open-minded. It's trying to learn. And if we take away all the complexities and challenges that are occurring in our world and we just think, who do we want to be as people? I think most of us would probably say, yeah, we want to be learning. We want to be kind to people. We don't want to insult people. We want to give people what they need. And if something really upsets them, why would we do it? So just kind of having that mindset and having the accountability to say, are we consistently learning, right? Whether that be reading articles on your own, whether it be doing sessions about it, right? Talking to reverse mentors, being ERG sponsors, right? How are we constantly learning, not just in business, not just about AI or a new technology, but also about people, right? And
Genuinely
being open to
curious.
that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
I think that you get a lot when you just ask somebody about something that you don't know, like directly. People are usually pretty open to that. They can see that
Yeah.
there's a willingness, if that's the case, if it's a trap and you're trying to catch somebody, that'll be seen as well. Um, this has been a really refreshing conversation. I think that you and I would have no problem filling much longer amount of time. I need to wrap us up here in a few minutes, but if you were to leave us with a tip or something that you know that really would help those either emerging leaders, middle leaders, or anyone who's wanting to be a stronger leader, what are your like top skills that they should develop, or your top tips for them to do so?
Yeah,
And you've
there's a
already
couple
given
of
us,
things. One,
yeah, I don't
what was
no
that?
repeats here. You've already said
Yeah.
listen was the big one. I agree. So
Yes, I
beyond
know.
listening authentically.
Beyond the listen. Well, I think you said one and it fits right with listen. So maybe it's being redundant, but is curiosity, right? Being curious.
Okay.
Because if you're talking about business, if you're talking about, how you set your priorities for the year or the month or the day, as a leader, listening to your people is so key, right? And being curious for it. But the other piece that I really think is so key is figuring out your perspective, being clear on what you think,
Mhm.
and then being willing to change it.
Flex.
So you know
Yeah.
what you think. You feel like you got it, right? You've done your research, you know your viewpoint, you think you're ready to run. But then being open-minded enough to say, is that actually the right? When you get new information, change your mind. Changing your
Mm.
mind is okay. And a lot of leaders, especially new emerging leaders, feel like, I can't change my mind. If I pivot, that means I didn't know. I'm not showing my value as a leader. And actually, the best leaders take in those viewpoints and change their mind, right? We think about sunk costs. We think about, right, the pieces of that are lost of going forward when you probably started to realize it wasn't the right path. So being able and willing to change your mind is not a sign of weakness. And maybe you have to figure out the politics in your role and your leaders because it might not be, a perfectly safe place for that. But changing your mind, you can do it in a very professional way to say, oh, new information has arrived here. Here's how I'm
Yeah.
changing based on that. And really being willing to do that and knowing it's not a weakness.
Mm. You can change the world if you can change your mind. I love it.
Exactly.
Mm. Thank you so much for your time today, Rebecca. This has been a great conversation.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the conversation, and I feel like we need a whole nother one just on diversity, equity, and inclusion now, too.
Hey, I don't hate that. I think we should. We should. All right.